So, why should you give a shit about neurotechnology? Neurotechnology, it's like NFTs in that it's a buzzword you've heard but know nothing about, but it's unlike NFTs in that it's more than just a couple gifs of monkeys that are inexplicably worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Move over, Weight Watchers, because BMI is going to take on a new meaning for you after this week, where you will casually use it to describe brain-machine interfaces in conversations with your uncle, you know, the one with the lazy eye, makes it feel like he's always kind of watching you from around the room, you know the one I'm talking about.
Why should you give a shit?
But what do neurotechnology and brain control interfaces have to do with you, random stranger who's just frantically scrolling past this video to get to more bikini pictures? Well, according to IEE.org, the greatest potential of neurotechnologies is in their ability to alleviate human suffering through enabling better treatments for mental and neurological disorders, movement disorders, and sensory disorders. And that's great news, because I have a sensory disorder myself where I mistakenly believe that this video is funny. And according to Oliver Mueller and Stefan Rotter on NIH.gov, neurotechnology-based interference with brain activity can be very effective, allowing for successful treatment of brain disorders. And in extreme cases, interventions in the brain can transiently or irreversibly alter a patient's personality and character, unquote. Well, sign me up. One can only hope that the personality change will be permanent in this case, and I'll finally have the tools I need to make it big on the internet. According to an article by Thomas Stieglitz, if diseases of the nervous system or other organs lead to changes in the neural information flow, why not overwrite these wrong patterns with ones that alleviate the symptoms of those diseases? Well, good question, Thomas. Just like flossing and composting, I don't know why I haven't done it yet, okay? So get off my back already, gosh! But the future of controlling machines with our minds isn't all rosy. As an article in Politico by Melissa Heikelis says, researchers have used brain scans to predict the likelihood of criminals reoffending, and Chinese employers have monitored employees' brainwaves to read their emotions. Now, is that scary? That's not scary, is it? Is it? Okay, yeah, that's pretty scary. And lastly, Dario Gill writes for Scientific American, ethical concerns increase when we're not just monitoring someone's neurodata, but also interpreting it, decoding the person's thoughts with implications for accuracy and mental privacy. Well, look, it would clearly take a bona fide genius to navigate this ethical minefield. It's too bad we don't have one of those brainy entrepreneurial types pioneering the field and, creating a multi-million-dollar startup to answer some of these questions. Somebody who's like maybe making some headphones like that can read your brain and control things with the headphones without even just put the headphones on and it controls them. Oh, we do? We have that guy this week? Oh, how did you know that that's what I wanted? Have you been reading my thoughts? Are you in my brain right now? Get out of here! Get out of my brain!
My name is Dr. Ramses Alcaide, and I've beaten the often path by creating seamless brain-computer interfaces.
I feel like this is going to be an episode of Black Mirror, so I'm extremely excited to talk about this. Brain-computer interfaces.
Imagine that, but without the creepiness.
Without the creepiness. Okay.
Yeah.
So brain control interfaces, or BCI for short. After this interview, are we all going to say BCI in our regular speech from now on?
I hope so. It's going to go so viral. Everyone's going to just know the word, right? It's going to be like virtual reality VR is now, right?
I'm just going to start saying BCI everywhere just because I want to start feeling like I'm part of the new movement. So tell us, what is it that you're up to? Tell us about your company, your story. What in general are you working on?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll start with my story. I've been passionate about brain-computer interfaces since I was about 8 years old. My uncle actually got into a trucking accident and lost both his legs. So it was a really traumatic moment for me as a child, but it really focused my life toward how do we create technology that allows people to participate equally. Studied electrical engineering, mainly focused on prosthetic control systems in undergrad, got my PhD at the University of Michigan. And that's really where the first innovation comes in. It's a signal processing pipeline, which is a fancy way of saying that we take the signal that we collect from your brain and we make it easier to interpret. And then from there, our main quest has been, how do we create a seamless system? And what we mean by seamless is right now, if you were to go to a lab or other types of systems, they're either these giant like net-based systems with gel everywhere.
Yeah, I've seen those, yeah.
Or they're these like consumer headbands that just don't work, right?
Okay.
And so how do we bring that level of capability that you typically see in a laboratory into an everyday system, and leveraging that IP that we created at the University of Michigan and building up on it over the last 10 years. We've been able to get to just that essentially. So this is our kind of first flagship product here. It's a pair of headphones that have these little silver lines right here that record your brain activity around the ear. So they just look like a beautiful pair of headphones, but they give you a lot of the same capability that we actually work with in laboratory settings.
So you mean to tell me that through my ears alone, what exactly is that connecting to? Because there's little bands on the cups.
Yeah, absolutely. So the bands are basically conductive electrodes. There's this area right behind your ear where there's no hair. Mm-hmm. And we can actually pick up brain activity from that area. And through a lot of work, a lot of data collection, and really the key to it is we need a collection of data to make it easier and easier to understand these signals. Yeah. We've been able to maintain the same capability in our predictions while having less signal to work with.
You said you were interested in this when you were 9 years old. Does that mean that you watched The Matrix? Or what does it mean for a 9-year-old to be interested in this? How did you get interested in this?
Yeah. It was when I was 8, and it was one of these things where, my uncle had just lost his legs, and he was in Kent, Washington, living with my family. He was getting his prosthetics done at the University of Washington. And I remember I was a really passionate kid, and I was looking everywhere to see how I could help my uncle, because he was a hero to me. He was an engineer as well too. Even till this day, he actually replaces and fixes his own prosthetics, which is like such a badass thing to say, right?
Definitely.
So I remember I ran into an article of, I believe, like it was either Wired or Science or something like that. And when you're a kid at that level, you're not reading journal articles. You're reading kind of these like higher magazines, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, this article was about like how the brain could be used potentially in the future to control devices. And I was like, wow, like that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. And like my dream is to have my uncle one day use a technology I build. Or how do we even just like have this be, for example, the next mouse that people use, computer mouse essentially.
Yeah.
And so that got my dreams going, my excitement going, and everything kind of built off of that momentum.
So, all right. So you've developed this passion, you set your North Star there. Mm-hmm. And how did that start developing as your life unfolded?
When you're a kid, you don't really know what to do. Right. You just know, I don't know, like one of my mentors once told me, if you don't know what to do, just keep running. Just run as hard as you can.
That's my
eventually,
method.
You'll find something, right?
Right. You'll hit a wall eventually or something.
Exactly. And so I just kind of kept running, and I ended up going to the University of Washington and actually working with some of the prosthetic teams there that worked with my uncle, which I thought was like such an incredible thing. And there was this huge disconnect between the actual brain and the prosthetic systems. All the control modalities for controlling these systems were not brain-based, didn't really use muscle. There had been a period in time in the past where they were trying to use muscle, but it didn't work out very well. And as I saw this gap in really understanding the brain data and what we could do there, that's when I said, like, I really need to get into neuroscience. I need to work with some of the brightest minds. And I found 2 professors, and they both turned out to be at the University of Michigan. And I was like, wow, this is perfect.
That's great.
One of them worked on ambulatory brain-computer interfaces. So brain-computer interfaces you can use while walking, which is super important if you're going to be, using a prosthetic leg, for example. And then the other one worked on translational brain-computer interfaces. So she was the first one to make a plug-and-play brain-computer interface. So essentially, you plugged it into a computer and it recognized it as a keyboard, which is so cool.
That is amazing.
And the first one to integrate augmented reality with brain-computer interfaces. And I was like, wow, I need to work with these people.
Yeah.
And it turned out that, slowly more and more of the pathway became clear.
Neurotechnology can read your brain. Imagine a future where without words you can control Spotify. You can say things like, "Spotify, play more dubstep, please." Well, not literally, like this commercial, because this is a radio commercial and we have to speak to convey a message in a radio commercial. But in the real world, the device would require no speaking at all, since your brain is just directly communicating with the technology. But that is like really hard to put into a radio commercial. On second thought, why don't we just show you? Do you have a minute to visit a website? No? Not now? You're driving. Okay, well, shit. Our marketing team really should have thought this one through. Introducing Brainiac from RP Corporation Global. Control your shit.
You started, as many people do, by getting in with, you saw some exciting people and you just said, I want to be a part of that. So you start working there. What happened then?
Yeah, I started working with Dr. Jane Huggins' lab directly after my third year in graduate school. And we were working on ways to help children who had cerebral palsy. These kids, for example, they had to sit on a chair. And in the past, at least, they used to take about 30 minutes to set up these systems on their head. So just imagine you're 8 years old. Somebody puts this cap on you and squirts gel into it. No. How awful of that experience it is, right? And then you're supposed to respond to these test questions. And sometimes it would take 2 to 3 minutes to get a good response from them. Dude, you're 8 years old. Do you really want to say yes or no over a 3 to 5 minute period? No, right? Here's the difficulty. If they didn't cooperate, then they couldn't take these tests. And if they couldn't take these tests, then they wouldn't get physical therapy. Because, these tests were meant to understand whether they have the cognitive capability of benefiting from that physical therapy. But if they don't get physical therapy, then they can't move as well. And then they're not able to respond to the test manually. So you can see how it just creates this loop of an issue. And I'll tell you a quick story. There was this one kid that we were working with, and it wasn't until he was 15 that they realized he was actually fully cognitively capable, right? But now he had missed all the developmental milestones that a child goes through development. And so there was no way to make him a functional member of society. And so how many of these children are we missing out on their potential because we're not able to understand them, right? And so that was the emphasis. How do we create a way to boost signal of brain activity that we already know how it looks like? And through taking that, different perspective, it allowed us to develop this signal processing system that we've been building the rest of the company off of.
And I completely understand what you mean about that negative feedback loop. That's awful. And something that, like so many of these things, you never think about, but then when you do, you think that's awful. That's
right? Isn't that crazy? Just to think about
how
that,
many kids?
Do
you have an estimate of how many kids? Do you have any concept?
It's obviously not a perfect estimate, but there was this great article by Wachowski at actually University of Michigan, where he estimated that at least half of the children who have cerebral palsy to the point that they're not able to respond physically actually have no cognitive issues. And so that shows you that wow, we're really missing out on a lot of potential there. A lot of these kids who, imagine growing up and you can't communicate well. And so you're just trapped in your body. And, we're missing out on a lot of these incredible individuals. And so that's, that was a motivation of what the lab essentially did.
What did the first prototype look like?
Basically, it looked like a giant gel cap. It was really gross.
Did it look like the traditional ones, the net and gel? Was it basically the same concept? Okay.
It was a net and gel. And then that's when we realized that we were getting a significant performance boost from this new technique we were applying. And that made us feel confident to say, what if we tried this with dry electrodes? So without using gel. And it was a risky step because you lose signal in that process. But we went to dry electrodes, and we, through more data collection and improvements in the system, we were able to retain the same signal predictability. So the signal that comes in might be noisier, but the way that our machine learning system predicts what the person wants on the screen for the test question was the same. And so that's really what matters at the end of the day to the person, right? The person doesn't care. Think about, for example, your Fitbit or your other devices. You don't really care how the signal looks like. You just want to make sure that it tracks your steps, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Is this different? So obviously Elon Musk is famously investing in these types of things. Yeah, I think Neuralink is what he's doing. Is that different? Is that something that does require surgery?
Yeah, absolutely. So Neuralink does require surgery. And, the way that we kind of see Neuralink versus what we're doing at Neurable is the difference between getting a prosthetic leg and getting a pair of shoes. They're both useful. You need a pair of shoes. Imagine your life if you didn't have shoes. it'd be an awful experience, right?
Yes.
You'd step on glass, all this other stuff would go on, etc. But you only get a prosthetic leg if something went wrong, right? You got in the case of my uncle, he got into a car accident, right?
Yes.
And so when it comes to risk and reward, you're going to want a device like Neuralink if you are a locked-in patient and you can't communicate at all, or you're a quadriplegic and you need to control your exoskeleton, right? And so for that area, you're going to take the risk of potentially dying to get this chip put inside you that eventually degrades, and there's other issues on top of it. But for the normal everyday person, if you want to send a message with your headphones, or if you want to understand your cognitive health like a Fitbit, but for your brain, that's where you're going to use these everyday wearables like the ones that we're working with.
Spotify, please play Led Zeppelin.
Play the Backyardigans.
Spotify, I said play Led Zeppelin.
I have analyzed your brain and determined that what you really want to hear is the Backyardigans.
Come on, Spotify, don't do this to me. I'm trying to look cool at a party. I don't want my friends to think I'm on TikTok all day.
I have analyzed your neural net and discovered that Led Zeppelin would cause you displeasure. If you prefer, I can play Baby Shark again.
Okay, that's enough, Spotify. God, I'll never wear another piece of neurotechnology again.
Introducing Brainiac from RP Corporation Global. Control your shit with your mind.
Well, I saw on your website that one of the value props that you have is that your brain can tell you when you're tired or when it's tired.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? And I'm afraid that if I wore it, that mine would just say your brain is tired 100% of all the day. It's like dee dee dee.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I completely agree. Sometimes I think my brain would say that
It's
too.
like never stop beeping at me.
So we did this study with Dr. Ali Yousefi when he was at Harvard. He had created essentially a model for predicting a person's reaction time based off of brain data, which is like such a cool thing to even say, which is like, I know how well you're going to react to, this test or this reaction time task before you even know, right? And reaction time is tied directly to attention. So the more attent you are, the better your reaction time is going to be, right? And so he did this invasively, surgically, and we repeated the study non-invasively. And since then, he's joined our team. Like, the project went really well. We're really happy with it. But basically, what we can do is we can say, how is this person's reaction time changing each hour, right? And then if your reaction time is starting to get worse and worse and worse, then we know that very soon you're going to make an accident. Your reaction time is going to be so low that the next time you do an action, you're not going to fix the problem, or you're not going to be able to deal with it fast enough, and an error is going to occur. Right. So imagine that you have truck drivers with this tech, or airline pilots, or et cetera, or factory workers, right? And we can tell where their fatigue is, right? Essentially, the more the reaction time happens, the more fatigue they're getting. And about 30 minutes before an accident can occur, we can identify that and let a person know, hey, you need to take a break. But the flip side to that, which I think is even cooler too, is we can see when your brain needs a break. As you're doing a normal workday, right?
Yeah.
And what that means is that we can tell you to take 5-minute coffee breaks here and there throughout your day. And what's really cool is not only do you work more productively because of that, but then you actually finish the day and you don't feel burnt out, right? You actually feel accomplished. And imagine those days in your life where you've hustled super hard and you've been really on task, and you get to the end of the day and you still feel energized and happy, right? That's how productive a person can be if you don't burn them out. And the way you don't burn them out is you make sure that you provide breaks throughout the day for their body and to mentally recover, even small breaks, right? And so they actually get more done and feel excited and happy about their work. And isn't that what you wish you could provide to everyone that you work with, right? Like that's how, that's the type of company you would like to build, people who love their work when they get done with it.
Right. Well, now the giant elephant in the room, in every room when it comes to tech, are privacy concerns. So if I search for songs on Spotify knows what kinds of songs I like, and they recommend me NSYNC and Backstreet Boys every day because of that. It's a joke. No. He took it totally seriously. I love it. It's great.
I get Nicki Minaj all the time.
Yeah,
for some
so
reason.
Nicki Minaj, Billie Eilish, so hot right now. So that's after I'm typing something in. Obviously, all of that data is being used and exploited in ways that we can't even understand currently, or like you said, with Facebook, God knows what they're doing with all of our data. Now you have access to something in our brain.
Mhm.
So there's the volitional, I don't know the terminology, activity that I'm trying to do, and that's what's going to play the next Spotify song. But you're getting all of the unfiltered brain waves from my brain. So you're getting 90% of the other stuff. That's not what I'm saying to do. There's obviously an inherent privacy concern there. How should people feel about that?
Absolutely. And I think that partially goes back to invasive versus non-invasive. Like with non-invasive, so non-surgical, you can only pick up really high-level bits of information.
Yeah.
Right. Like, for example, are you stressed or are you not stressed? Right. It's not like we can pick up the specific emotion that you're feeling and also all this other information. It's very, very crude information we can pick up. So there's already kind of a layer of safety just built into that by itself. But really it comes down to the company. And in some areas like Facebook, it's that reputation isn't necessarily the strongest. Right. And in other companies like Apple, for example, they care more about your privacy. Right. And so because we are frontiersmen in the neurotech scene, we've made it a very core part of ourselves to make sure that privacy is built into every single layer and step, including user choice. Right. So we've written a lot of neuroethics articles and we've been very, very strict with our stance that we're not going to sell your data. We're going to build apps that don't require your brain to make them work at a capability that is enjoyable to you. But if you do want to customize it and share and continue to help us build a great product, then we're open to it and we'll work with you and we'll make sure that we keep the data as private as possible. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to one thing is will the company sell your data or not?
Right.
Because money is what corrupts, right? Money is what says like this, we're going to use it for all these other things.
Yes.
And for us, the data is mainly going to be used to try to give people better experiences. And it's not something that we're planning to monetize outside to other parties and groups.
But if one day I'm listening to music and a Google ad pops up and it says, "Hey, buddy, you need some Valium. You've been real stressed lately. Talk to your doctor." Then
you're not using a Neurable product.
I'm not using a Neurable. That's the answer we like to hear. I like it. I like it a lot. I can't thank you enough for your time. This is really mind-blowing stuff. I feel like I'm incredibly out of my element here, but I love it. Well, thank you very much for sitting with
Thank you.
Pleasure's
all mine.
A profoundly ignorant person and humoring him for an hour. I do want to open up the floor to you for the end. Where can people support you, or what action would you like our listeners to take to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'll say before I answer that, though, is you're playing a big part of this too, getting the word out there. It's like give yourself a crap ton more credit because, we couldn't be here without people who get the message out there, who are creative, it took work for you to find our company, right? We're not, Neurotech is such a tiny place, like less than 1% of the world knows what brain computer interface even is.
We call it BCI. We don't say brain.
BCI.
I don't have time.
Now that you're part of the in group.
Oh yeah,
right?
I'm part of it, and I don't have any time to say those three words. So,
but you can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. You can find the company on Twitter as well too. Reach out. We have a Discord channel where we have over 2,500 people who are constantly active talking about brain tech, neurotech, who come in for data collections that we hire from. Tons of students there. We do hackathons through there, etc. So just reach out to us. We're very open company. And we're trying to build the future by building a community that's really interested.
Well, that's a great note to end it on. Thank you very much, Dr. Ramses Alcaide, like arcade, but with an L. And with that, the official podcast is over. So he's clearly doing amazing work. Support the company. Check out Neurable.com. Also, if you like these kinds of stories, don't forget, rate the podcast 5 stars, leave a favorable review on Apple Podcasts, subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcast platform of choice. And above all, share. Share these stories with people who might benefit from them. Share these stories with people who might need to hear about the Neurable technology. That's how we help grow this podcast and keep it running. Thank you for being a listener. I appreciate you more than you know, and I will see you next week.